She was the best wildfire jumper they had. So why was her director grounding her just hours before the most dangerous mission of their lives? The reason was a secret buried in the ashes of the past. The air at the National Interagency Fire Center base in Montana tasted of pine and impending battle. At 0500 hours, the pre-dawn chill was sharp, but the scent of distant smoke, a ghost on the wind, promised a day of heat and fury. Dr. Elara, Lynx, Vance moved through the gear-up hangar with the fluid economy of a predator. Her fellow smokejumpers, a tight-knit crew of seasoned veterans, gave her nods of respect as she meticulously inspected the seams of her parachute rig. Every buckle, every strap, every fold was checked with a surgeon's precision. This was her sanctuary, the ritual that silenced the noise of the world. The mission, codenamed Operation Inferno Line, was the kind they'd talk about for years. A megafire, born from a tinder-dry summer and freak lightning storms, was rampaging through the Flathead National Forest. It wasn't just a fire, it was a monster, generating its own weather and defying all conventional models. Nestled deep in its projected path was the Kestrel Peak Observatory, a vital climate research station holding decades of irreplaceable atmospheric data. Morning, Lynx. Ben, Otter, Carter, her jump partner, settled onto the bench beside her, his usual easygoing grin tight with tension. Heard the latest forecast? Wind shear over the drop zone is a real beast. It's not the shear I'm worried about, Elara murmured, running a gloved hand over the Kevlar plating of her jumpsuit. It's the inversion layer. It's poised to collapse. When it does, the fire will explode. Way above my pay grade, Otter said, shaking his head. That's why your point. You see the fire's soul, not just its flames. Before she could reply, a sudden quiet fell over the bustling hangar. The casual chatter died. The clatter of equipment ceased. Regional Director Croft had entered the room. A man carved from granite and old-school regulations, Croft's presence sucked the air from any space he occupied. Flanked by two aides, he scanned the room, his gaze landing on Elara like a physical weight. He strode directly toward her. Dr. Vance, his voice was a low rumble that carried across the concrete floor. A word. Otter gave her a questioning look, but Elara's expression remained a placid mask. She stood, her posture perfectly straight. Sir. Croft gestured to an open space away from the main group. When they were out of earshot, he spoke without preamble. You're being removed from the jump list for Operation Inferno Line. The statement hung in the cold air, devoid of emotion. Elara's face didn't flicker. May I ask for the reason, Director? My assessment is that your recent performance metrics indicate a risk profile incompatible with the mission's complexity, he stated, his eyes cold and unyielding. This is my final decision. Risk profile. The words were bureaucratic poison, a cowardly way of saying he didn't trust her. Elara knew exactly what this was about. It was always about the Blackwood fire. It was always about Liam. She could have argued, cited her spotless record, her unparalleled success rate, the fact she literally wrote the book on pyrocumulus dynamics. But she knew it would be useless. Arguing with Croft was like arguing with a rockslide. With crisp, deliberate movements, she unclipped the advanced meteorological scanner from her belt, a piece of tech she'd personally calibrated, and handed it to him. Understood, sir. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of something, disappointment. Frustration, crossed Croft's face. He had clearly expected a fight, a protest he could publicly crush. Her quiet compliance denied him the satisfaction. He gave a curt nod. Report to Mark Ramsey for reassignment. Turning her back on him, Elara walked toward the locker bay, feeling the stares of her entire unit on her. Each step was measured. She would not give him, or anyone, the satisfaction of seeing her break. The locker room was a silent tomb. Methodically, she began to strip off her gear. The fire-resistant jumpsuit was folded with military precision. Her helmet, bearing the faint, stylized image of a lynx, was placed on its shelf. As she opened her locker, her eyes fell upon a faded photograph taped to the inside of the door. It was from 5 years ago. A younger, smiling Director Croft stood with his arm around a proud young Smokejumper, Liam, his golden boy protege. And next to them, in the same frame, was Elara herself, looking younger, her hair shorter, her expression one of fierce academic focus. Politics is a hell of a thing, isn't it? Elara turned to see her unit supervisor, Mark Ramsey, leaning against the doorway. He was a veteran with kind eyes and a deep understanding of the base's undercurrents. "He's never forgiven you for Blackwood," Mark said softly, stepping inside. "We both know this has nothing to do with a risk profile. He's the director, Mark." "It's his call," Elara said, her voice flat as she zipped her duffel bag shut. "So we sideline our best jumper, our only fire scientist on the line, hours before the most complex burn we've ever seen. Because of his grudge." Mark shook his head in disgust. "I could make a call to HQ." "No," Elara's voice was suddenly sharp, laced with steel. "Please. Don't. It would only make things worse." Mark studied her, a deep respect in his gaze. "Sometimes I forget you walked away from a major position to be here. I never understood why." "That information remains classified, Mark," she said, picking up her bag. "If there's nothing else, I should get to my reassignment." She walked past him, out into the hallway where her team was now gathering for the final briefing. A wall of silence met her. She was no longer one of them. She was an outsider, cast out before the final battle. She didn't look back. Looking back only slowed you down. Elara's reassignment was a special kind of insult, a masterclass in bureaucratic humiliation. She was sent to the supply depot at the far end of the base, a cavernous warehouse that smelled of dust, canvas, and mildew. Her task, inventorying hose couplings. It was a job for a rookie, a punishment designed to grind her down. Surrounded by silent shelves stacked high with equipment she was uniquely qualified to use, she was a caged eagle forced to count pebbles. But Elara's mind was not a thing that could be grounded. While her hands sorted and catalogued brass fittings, her thoughts were thousands of feet in the air, in the heart of the Inferno line. The official models, the ones Croft and his team relied on, were all based on historical data and predictable patterns. They were solid, reliable, and in this case, dangerously wrong. This fire wasn't following the rules. After an hour of mind-numbing work, she found what she was looking for, a forgotten data terminal in a dusty corner office. The connection was slow, but it was a link to the outside world. With keystrokes that were as deft and certain as her movements in the field, she bypassed the low-level user interface and accessed the raw satellite and atmospheric data feeds. The screen filled with numbers and thermal images. To a layperson, it was a chaotic swirl of red and orange. To Elara, it was a language she understood better than English. She saw it instantly. A massive pyrocumulus cloud, a fire-generated thunderstorm, was forming directly over the blaze, but it was rotating against the dominant wind shear. An atmospheric impossibility. Spot fires were leaping miles ahead of the main front, not in the fan-shaped pattern of a normal wildfire, but in a branching, fractal pattern that looked almost intelligent. Alive. "It's collapsing the inversion layer from within," she whispered to the empty room, her heart pounding with a mixture of academic fascination and cold dread. "It's creating its own mesocyclone." This was the signature. The terrifying, beautiful, and utterly unique fingerprint of her life's secret work. A wildfire prediction model so advanced, so complex, that it bordered on precognition. A system that used AI and quantum computing principles to model a fire not as a chemical reaction, but as a living, chaotic entity. Project Chimera. And no one in that briefing room knew it was about to change the world. They were planning to fight last year's war, bringing knives to a gunfight with a dragon. She ran a quick simulation in her head, the complex algorithm spooling through her memory. Her model showed a 97% probability of a catastrophic firestorm event within the next 3 hours, an event that would overrun the Kestrel Peak Observatory and vaporize 100 square miles of forest in minutes. The official models predicted a slow, steady advance over the next 12 hours. Her secure satellite phone, a relic from a past life she was supposed to have left behind, vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. An encrypted message from a number identified only as WHSSEC. The White House Science Advisor. The text was a single line. Oracle, stand by for contact. Authorize full protocol access. Oracle. The codename for the human element of Project Chimera. Her codename. With a steady hand, she deleted the message. Her eyes lifted from the phone and looked out the grimy warehouse window. On the distant horizon, the smoke plume was no longer just a column. It was a churning, bruised purple thunderhead, pregnant with a fury that no one else was prepared for. The time for inventorying couplings was over. She had to get back to the command center. She didn't know how, but she knew the call was coming. She walked out of the warehouse, leaving the piles of brass fittings behind, her posture once again that of a soldier heading into battle. Her quiet period of exile was about to end, and the real mission was about to begin. The command center for Operation Inferno Line was a pressure cooker of controlled panic. Banks of monitors displayed a dizzying array of maps, thermal images, and data streams. The air hummed with the low thrum of servers and the clipped, tense voices of communication officers. At the center of it all stood Director Croft, pointing a laser at a 3D topographical map of the Kestrel Peak region. Our primary jump point will be here, on the northern ridge, Croft announced, his voice straining to project unshakable confidence. This gives us a solid defensible anchor point to burn back from, creating a firebreak well ahead of the predicted advance. His plan was textbook. It was logical, defensible, and what they would have done for any other major fire. But this wasn't any other major fire. In the back of the room, Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant young meteorologist on loan from JPL, stared at her own screen, her brow furrowed. She pushed her glasses up her nose and raised a hand. Director Croft. Croft paused, visibly annoyed at the interruption. What is it, Doctor? Sir, the energy release signatures we're seeing are anomalous, Lena began, her voice gaining confidence as she delved into the data. The rate of spread is exponential, not linear. The atmospheric instability doesn't match any existing model for pyroconvection. In fact, she hesitated, knowing she was stepping onto dangerous ground. These patterns are eerily consistent with the theoretical framework of the Chimera event papers. The room fell silent. The name, Chimera, hung in the air, a piece of arcane, almost mythical science fiction to most in the room. Croft's face hardened into a mask of contempt. The Chimera event is an academic fantasy, a thought experiment, he snapped, his voice sharp with dismissal. We are dealing with a real fire, Doctor, and we will fight it with proven, practical methods. Not by chasing ghosts from some unpublished thesis. Is that clear? Lena paled and sank back into her chair, thoroughly chastised. Yes, sir. Ben, Otter, Carter exchanged a worried glance with another senior jumper. They didn't understand the science, but they understood the fear in Dr. Petrova's voice, and they understood the raw fury in Croft's dismissal. Something was very wrong. As if on cue, a communications officer spun around in his chair, his face ashen. Sir. I have a report from air attack. The fire just jumped the Serpent River. I repeat, it has jumped the river. A collective gasp went through the room. The Serpent River was a massive, natural firebreak over a mile wide. It was their primary containment line, the one thing the models all agreed the fire couldn't cross for at least another 24 hours. On the main screen, the mission success probability indicator, which had been holding at a shaky 62%, plummeted to 35%. Then 20%. The jumper who had replaced Elara, a competent but inexperienced man named Rook, stood up, his face slick with sweat. Sir, with the river breached, that northern ridge isn't an anchor point anymore, it's a death trap. The fire will be on top of us before we can even dig in. He gestured frantically at the map. Dr. Vance. Elara, she scouted an alternative drop zone in the eastern cirque. It's riskier on insertion, but it uses the rock formations as a natural shield. It might be our only shot. Croft's jaw tightened until the muscles bulged. The mention of Elara's name was like a spark on gasoline. I have made my decision regarding the roster and the approach, he ground out, his authority now brittle. We proceed as planned. Dr. Vance is not part of this operation. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. They were being sent on a suicide mission, and the man in charge was too stubborn, too blinded by something they didn't understand, to see it. It was in that moment of suffocating silence that the main door to the command center burst open. A breathless lieutenant from Central Communications rushed in, holding a secure phone. Director Croft, he panted, his eyes wide with urgency and disbelief. It's the White House on Secure Line 1. The National Science Advisor. He's demanding an immediate, room-wide audio-visual connection. Sir, he says it's about the Oracle. The tactical display on the main screen flickered, and the 3D map of the Inferno line was replaced by the face of a man in a crisp suit, his expression one of calm, absolute authority. Dr. Eris Thorne, the President's National Science Advisor, sat in a room that was unmistakably the White House Situation Room. Director Croft, Dr. Thorne began, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the command center. There were no pleasantries. I have been monitoring the rapidly deteriorating situation at Kestrel Peak. I am officially overriding your command decision regarding Operation Inferno Line. Croft's face, already pale, drained of its remaining color. He looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Sir, with all due respect, you don't have the authority. I have a direct executive order from the President, Director, Thorne interrupted coolly. Your authority on this matter is rescinded. Now, listen carefully. You are to put the Oracle on the roster. She jumps, and she is in tactical command. Is that understood? A wave of confusion washed over the room. Even Croft was speechless, his mind scrambling. Sir, he finally stammered, I'm not familiar with that call sign. There is no jumper on this base with the designation Oracle. Dr. Thorne's expression remained impassive, but his eyes were like chips of ice. No, Director, you wouldn't be. Her operational file is classified 5 levels above your clearance. Project Chimera was established 3 years ago, under the lead of its chief architect and sole field operator. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. A scientist by the name of Dr. Elara Vance. The revelation detonated in the room like a bomb. A collective, audible gasp was heard. Ben Otter Carter shot to his feet, staring at Croft with undisguised fury. Dr. Petrova's mouth was wide open, her mind connecting the dots with dizzying speed, the anomalous data, the Chimera papers, the quiet, brilliant jumper who saw things no one else did. Dr. Vance's work on predictive chaotic systems is the single most important asset we have in combating these new megafires, Thorne continued, his voice echoing in the silent room. After the Blackwood incident, where the project's security was nearly compromised, she voluntarily accepted a demotion and a transfer to your unit to act as a low-profile field monitor. It was a cover, Director. A cover designed to protect both her and the project. She doesn't just belong on this mission. She is the only one who can succeed. As the full, staggering truth descended upon the room, the main doors opened again. Elara Vance stood there. She was in full jump gear, her helmet tucked under her arm. She hadn't been recalled, she had known the call was coming. She strode into the room, her presence completely transformed. The quiet, sidelined scientist was gone. In her place stood a commander, her eyes burning with an intensity that commanded the attention of every person in the room. On the screen, Dr. Thorne saw her and a look of profound relief washed over his face. He stood slightly straighter. Dr. Vance. Oracle. You're ready. Yes, sir. Elara's voice was calm and clear. I am. She walked to the front of the command center, stopping beside the utterly shell-shocked Director Croft. She didn't spare him a glance. Her focus was on the mission. She addressed the image on the screen. Sir, I am prepared to assume tactical command. It's yours, Doctor, Thorne replied. Proceed. Elara finally turned to Croft. Her expression was not triumphant or vengeful. It was pure, focused professionalism. With your permission, Director, she said, her voice even but unyielding, I need to update the mission parameters. Croft, a man who had been the absolute authority in this world moments before, could only manage a wooden nod. He stepped aside, seating the command station. Elara sat down, her fingers flying across the keyboard, typing in a long, complex authorization code. The display flickered, and the entire interface reconfigured, replaced by a swirling, almost organic-looking visualization of the fire. Project Chimera was now live. What you were seeing before was a map. This, Elara said, her voice resonating with newfound authority through the command center speakers, is the fire. The screen displayed a terrifying, living entity. The Chimera interface showed not just thermal data, but wind vectors, fuel density, atmospheric pressure, and a dozen other variables woven into a predictive model that pulsed with terrifying clarity. The official models failed because they see the fire as something acting upon the environment. They're wrong. The fire is the environment. It has created a stable mesocyclone. It's not just moving toward Kestrel Peak, it's pulling the entire weather system with it. In 90 minutes, it will generate a firestorm with winds exceeding 100 miles per hour. As she spoke, a secure file, transmitted directly from Dr. Thorne's office, appeared on Croft's personal tablet. The subject line read, Declassified, Blackwood Fire Incident Report, Eyes Only. His hands trembling slightly, he opened it. He saw the full, unredacted report. The fire had been a diversion. A rival agency had been attempting to steal the Chimera prototype. Lieutenant Liam, his protégé, hadn't died because of a reckless decision by Elara, as Croft had convinced himself for years. The report stated clearly that Liam had died defending Dr. Vance and the prototype from armed hostiles, giving her the crucial minutes she needed to secure the system and escape during the unexpected firestorm. Her subsequent demotion was a request, a sacrifice she made to bury the incident and protect the secrecy of a project vital to national security. He had spent 3 years tormenting the very woman his protégé had given his life to save. A wave of nausea and shame washed over him. Our only chance, Elara continued, oblivious to Croft's personal hell, is not to fight it, but to use its own energy against it. We're going to jump here. She indicated a spot on the map that made several jumpers flinch, a narrow, rocky canyon deep inside the fire's projected path. The mesocyclone is creating a temporary null zone in this canyon. A calm eye in the heart of the storm. It will last for exactly 28 minutes. We jump in, secure the observatory's primary data servers, reinforce the structure's fire shielding, and get out before the walls collapse. It was the most insane plan anyone had ever heard. It was also their only hope. Otter, you're with me, she commanded. Rook, you lead secondary team on extraction support. Gear up. We launch in 10 minutes. The room erupted into a flurry of disciplined action. The flight to the drop zone was a journey into hell. The small twin Otter plane was tossed violently by turbulence. Outside the windows, the sky was a bruised orange, and the smoke was so thick it seemed like a solid mass. Below them, the inferno line wasn't a line at all, it was a roaring ocean of flame. 30 seconds to drop zone, the pilot yelled over the engine's roar. Elara stood at the open door, the wind tearing at her. She was perfectly calm. Listen to me, she shouted to her team over the comms. Do not trust your eyes. Trust my commands. The winds here are vertical, not horizontal. Jump on my mark, and do not open your chutes until you hear my call. Oracle, you are a go, she said, speaking her own launch authorization. Then she leaped out into the swirling chaos. One by one, her team followed. They plummeted through smoke and ash, the roar of the fire deafening. It was a blind fall into oblivion. Mark. Elara's voice cut through the static. Now. They pulled their cords. The parachutes blossomed in the smoky air, and just as she predicted, a powerful vertical updraft caught them, halting their descent and pushing them laterally, away from a massive tornado that had been invisible in the smoke. They had flown under the radar of the storm itself. They landed softly in the eerie calm of the canyon, the roar of the fire surrounding them like a stadium full of screaming demons. The Kestrel Peak Observatory stood before them, a lonely outpost on the edge of the abyss. 26 minutes on the clock. Elara yelled. Let's go to work. What followed was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Under Elara's precise direction, the team moved with superhuman efficiency, a well-oiled machine protecting the lonely bastion of science. They secured the hardened servers, coated the main structure in fire-retardant gel, and dug a desperate, narrow trench. Elara moved between them, calling out wind shifts and ember falls seconds before they happened, her connection to the Chimera model giving her a sixth sense. Time's up. Get to the extraction point, she ordered, just as the first massive gust of wind signaled the collapse of their sanctuary. They sprinted to the clearing as the extraction helicopter descended through the smoke, a miracle of piloting in its own right. As they lifted off, they watched in awe as the canyon they had just occupied was consumed by a tidal wave of flame. The firestorm parted around the now shielded observatory, which stood defiant amidst the inferno. They had done the impossible. The return to base was different. The usual post-jump adrenaline and boisterous relief were replaced by a quiet, profound sense of awe. Every jumper on that helicopter kept stealing glances at Elara, who sat calmly monitoring the fire's data on a ruggedized tablet, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. She hadn't just led them, she had unlocked a new level of understanding of the force they fought. When the helicopter touched down, something unprecedented was waiting. Lined up along the path from the helipad to the debriefing hangar was an impromptu honor guard. Ground crew, mechanics, administrative staff, and off-duty jumpers stood in two silent, straight lines. No one had ordered it. It had formed organically, a spontaneous display of the deepest respect. Elara stepped out of the helicopter, pulling off her helmet. She paused, taking in the scene. For a moment, her professional mask wavered, replaced by a flicker of raw emotion. Then, she straightened her shoulders and walked the gauntlet, her head held high. The only sound was the crunch of her boots on the gravel and the whisper of the evening wind. Her team followed, sharing in the silent honor. The debriefing was short and efficient. The mission was a complete success. When it was over, Director Croft asked to speak with her alone in his office. The room was dark, save for the golden light of the setting sun filtering through the blinds. The air was thick with unspoken words. Croft stood behind his desk, no longer the unassailable director, but a tired, humbled man. Dr. Vance, he began, his voice raspy. He stood at attention and rendered a slow, formal salute. It wasn't the perfunctory gesture of a superior, but the solemn acknowledgement of one soldier to another who has displayed extraordinary valor. I have read the declassified Blackwood file. There are no words to express my failure. I let my grief create a fiction, and I made you pay for it. My actions were inexcusable. I am sorry. Elara held his gaze for a long moment before returning the salute. We all fight our own fires, Director. You didn't have all the facts. Dr. Thorne called, Croft said, finally lowering his hand. He wants you back in DC immediately. Your work is too important for you to be on the front lines. Your cover is no longer necessary. Elara turned to look out the window at the base, at the crews servicing the aircraft, at the jumpers cleaning their gear. A family. Her family. There's still work to be done here, sir," she said, turning back to him. The team performed flawlessly, but they were following orders blindly. They need to understand the principles of Chimera. They need to learn how to see the fire the way I do. Croft nodded, a look of immense respect on his face. "How long do you need?" "A few weeks should be sufficient," she replied. "After that, I'll report to the Pentagon, as ordered." Later, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and orange, Elara walked across the tarmac. Ben, Otter, Carter fell into step beside her. "So, Dr. Vance," he said, a wide, genuine grin on his face. "What happens now?" "Now, we train," Elara replied, a rare, small smile touching her lips. "And then, the mission continues. It always does." She looked up at the darkening sky, a few stars beginning to appear. The truth was out, her name was cleared, and her dignity was restored. But for Elara, the victory wasn't personal. It was the survival of the observatory, the knowledge saved, and the safety of her team. Recognition had never been the goal. Only the quiet satisfaction of a duty fulfilled. As she walked toward the setting sun, she carried herself with the same quiet confidence she always had. The only difference was that now, everyone else could finally see the brilliant fire that had always been burning within her. The truth had been revealed. A legend was born from the ashes. What do you think defines a true hero? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to always comment with respect. And if you are moved by Elara's story of courage and redemption, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more human stories that matter.